Blacking out like your dad on Christmas, using live ammunition when blanks would do just fine, and getting jaw surgery. Seriously man, how about some Invisalign next time? Whether you like these movies or not, you have to respect or maybe fear what these actors did to perform in them. Drawing from the various performers who had played the role before her, shout out Debbie Derryberry!
So pathetic.
As well as adding plenty of her own flavor to the mix, it's tough to imagine anyone else but Jenna Ortega playing the Addams daughter in Wednesday.
As usual, you underestimate me, Mother.
It's not as easy as it seems to have a cold, deadpan look and delivery without making your performance wooden. Ask Hilary Duff. Wednesday isn't emotionless, she just does her best not to wear those emotions all over her face. Courtney Cox would later try this in real life. To play the part, Ortega leaned into Wednesday director Tim Burton's love of the Kubrick stare, a technique that frequently appears in both My Wedding Photos and the films of director Stanley Kubrick, in which an actor slightly tilts their head downward or looking up with just their eyes. Imagine you're ordering at Chipotle, but like way scarier than that. She also decided that Wednesday should never blink. She was able to get all of the blinking in whenever the camera wasn't on her. I do the same thing. Somehow, Ortega managed to pull it all off without looking like a freshly incarcerated Hannibal Lecter.
That awful screaming of the lambs.
Okay, so if you watched Step Brothers before watching Parks and Rec, it might take a minute to not hate Ben Wyatt. In Step Brothers, where he is every single butthole you've ever met, his introduction takes a cake of buttholiness.
This is $1,200 a week for voice lessons, and this is what I get?
Adam Scott's character Derek is leading his family in an a cappella rendition of your dad's favorite classic rock ballad, Sweet Child of Mine. Remarkably, all of the singing in the scene was done live, but it wasn't done by all of the actors. Adam Scott, in a word, sucks ass at singing.
And I can sing high.
So in order to sell the idea that Derek can actually sing and expects nothing less of his wife and children, a professional singer had to be brought in. The scene would have been ruined if you could tell he was lip syncing, so the real, actually good singer was made to stand not only outside of the car, but directly in front of it. The car you see was stationary on a soundstage. This was done to avoid burdening Adam with vehicular manslaughter. As he sang, Scott's eyes had to remain fixed on the singer's mouth. Gross. Which allowed him to imitate the professional singer. The buttholy nature of the rest of the character, though, that was all Adam Scott.
You guys both look like you might want to hit me in the face.
After a few minor television roles, she was the bomb that came from outer space.
I'm a witness. So am I. Me too. All three of us.
Oh, Abe, how can I ever thank you?
Halle Berry's breakthrough performance came by way of her powerful portrayal of Vivian in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. It was a role she had to fight hard to even be considered for, as Lee felt Berry was too attractive to be taken seriously as a down-and-out drug addict. He felt, let the record show, that she was not too attractive to be taken seriously as his wife in the movie, which was his original intent. Berry pushed for the role of Vivian and eventually convinced him to let her play the part, which launched her film career. Berry didn't want to waste the opportunity she had been given. That would come much later with 2004's Catwoman. She wanted to make sure the audience wouldn't think she was too clean-cut or pretty to be taken seriously as Vivian, so she decided to go to the method acting route and stop bathing for several weeks in order to get into character as someone who had been living a rough life on the streets. She would later sing metaphorically in 2004's Catwoman.
Time to accessorize.
Some of Berry's co-stars kept their distance during her shower hiatus, much like audiences did for 2004's Catwoman.
Cat got your tongue.
I'm cracking out the Catwoman jokes today, boys, but it was clearly worth it in the long run, as her performance in Jungle Fever put her on the path to a long and prolific movie career, except for 2004's Catwoman. One more joke for good measure. Joaquin Phoenix is undeniably one of the greatest actors working today. He was not in 2004's Catwoman. Okay, I'll stop now. And he's among a select group that is known to completely disappear into their roles. He didn't kill anybody while making Joker, as far as we know, but otherwise he never seems to back down from an acting challenge.
What is the character?
So you haven't read it yet, or?
For Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master, Phoenix plays a World War II veteran named Freddie Quell. Freddie is, shall we say, not exactly a cool hang. He's very quiet but tightly wound, and to play him, Phoenix drew inspiration from his sounds like an absolute ton of fun father.
Does this bougie make poison?
Not if you drink it smart.
He told NPR, "My dad sometimes would talk out of the side. He'd clench down one side of his mouth, and I just thought it represented tension in this way. Somebody that's just blocked and tight." Instead of self-inducing constipation or tying himself up like a rodeo ball, Phoenix thought, "I'll just use brute force." Phoenix decided to have his dentist add metal brackets and rubber bands to his teeth, which forced half of his jaw shut, ensuring a constantly shy, side-mouthed appearance. Remember that time The Rock laid the smackdown on some chains? No? I didn't see that movie either. No matter what you might think about the caliber of Dwayne Johnson's acting abilities or the projects he appears in,
Can I get a little help here?
there's no accusing the former wrestler of phoning it in when it comes to no pain, no gain for him. Pain and gain is not only an IMDb result, but also a life motto. Sans all the murder, hopefully. He generally puts his body through the meat grinder to play the tan beefaroni he often plays.
Team Jesus Christ!
And anyone who doubts that needs to hear how his character escaped bondage while filming 2014's Hercules, and not the bondage you're thinking of. There is a scene in the movie where The Rock needs to break free from chains that bind his glistening, hairless arms, Johnson being way more Ken than Alan.
I'm Alan. I'm Ken's buddy.
Insisting on using real thick steel chains to film the struggle. Obviously, not even Johnson's impressive pecs can pop out of that, so some movie magic would be needed to actually break the chains. But up to that point, Johnson was fighting and straining against two chains. In fact, Johnson ended up blacking out in each of the 8 takes because he was going so hard. Reminds me of college.
So it's like, I am Hercules, and then I would black out.
The Hangover was a massive comedy hit about 3 friends putting their lives back together after a wild night in Vegas, and in fact, not a documentary about how mixing uppers and downers is awesome. Ed Helms plays a dentist named Stu who wakes up to discover that he really effing needs a dentist. Eventually, Stu discovers that he extracted the tooth himself during his drunken stupor in an effort to impress his friends. Worst party trick ever. Early in the movie, when Stu looks in the mirror, we get a clear shot of the studio apartment occupying the space where his tooth used to be. This rules out the usual blackout job that is typically done to achieve the missing tooth effect in movies. Helms told People, "We started to do different tests with prosthetics and blacking it out, and nothing worked. So then Ed thought, I'll just use brute force. It just so happens that one of Helms' front teeth was fake, as he had an implant in when he was a teenager. Helms revealed that he volunteered to have that tooth removed, and an implant that had been in Helms' mouth for nearly 20 years was emphatically Marie Kondo'd for the sake of art.
Does this item spark joy? If it does not, get rid of it.
Robert De Niro, best known as the dad in Meet the Fuckers, apparently got nominated for a ton of Oscars early in his career. Who knew? One of those nominations was for the 1978 Vietnam War drama, The Deer Hunter. The film was the first movie he ever made $1 million on, and he certainly worked hard for that payday. Spoiler alerts, he almost blew his brains out. De Niro has described his experience playing Staff Sergeant Mike Vronsky as some of the most physically and emotionally exhausting work he's ever done as an actor. Right up there, I imagine, with his harrowing turn as fearless leader in Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Are you talking to me?
There is a moment in the movie where Mike puts a gun directly to the head of Stanley and pulls the trigger. Always wanting to push himself to give the most believable performance possible, De Niro asked director Michael Cimino if there could be a live round in the gun. Even Nerf darts are too intense for me. Cimino pointed out that this would mean literally playing Russian roulette with John Cazale's life. But De Niro told him the gun could be rigged so that it wouldn't fire that round. Remind me to never go in the woods with Mr. Fucker. Remarkably, both Cimino and Cazale obliged the request, and De Niro went on to earn an Oscar nomination for his performance. If things had gone wrong, he may have earned life in prison, and we would have missed out on such classics as Analyze That, Stardust, and Las Vegas. The cast of the live-action, and also terrible, according to some, Scooby-Doo was a veritable who's who of young Hollywood at the time, with the role of munching-craving scaredy-cat cool, but we won't go into why Norville Shaggy Rogers going to Matthew Lillard of Scream fame. For much of Shaggy's existence, the character had been voiced by your boomer grandma's favorite radio DJ, Casey Kasem. Kasem gave Shaggy a voice that sounded perpetually hoarse, as if he was constantly taking a drag from a totally legal cigarette. So when it came time for Lillard to do the voice, he replicated the sounds not by inhaling the air at a Fish concert, but by literally screaming himself into a sore throat.
I'm Mary Jane.
Like, that is my favorite name.
Really?
Lillard got so good at it, he was able to do it without all the screaming, and went on to voice Shaggy in the majority of the character's multimedia appearances. He didn't take over any of Kasem's other jobs though. If you were born before 1980, you probably consider Adventures in Babysitting a staple of your childhood. And by staple, I mean puberty catalyst. Hello, Elizabeth Shue.
Hi.
The 1987 comedy follows angelic Chris Parker, who was stood up by the most douchily named 80s boyfriend ever, Mike Todwell.
See you around, Mike.
And as a result, stumbles into a wild night full of crazy.
Oh, Thor, mighty god of thunder.
Who is this kid?
Among those along for the ride is Brad, who, and this is my favorite sentence in this entire video, gets his foot stabbed during a gang fight on a train. While rehearsing the scene, the casting crew were trying to figure out the best way to stab him in the foot. That's when actor Keith Coogan, who would later grow his hair and kill the babysitter in an entirely different movie about babysitting,
Dishes are done, man.
came up with the idea of pulling the knife from the shoe and just playing the shot in reverse. The idea worked, much to the relief of Keith's toes. A lot of unsavory accusations came out during the high-profile 2022 courtroom battle between trash couple Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. We don't have to, nor do we want to, get into all of them, but one sticks out because it was professional in nature and involved absolutely no beds or poop. Depp's former agent Tracy Jacobs claimed that Depp wore an earpiece on set to have his lines fed to him like he was on an episode of Impractical Jokers.
I leave negative Yelp reviews on my wife's noodle shop.
I leave negative Yelp reviews for my wife's noodle shop.
This claim was one of several examples she used to support her assertion that Depp's talent and commitment to his work had declined in recent years. She also, I imagine, just wanted an excuse for the Fantastic Beasts movies. However, Keenan Wyatt, a sound engineer who has collaborated with Depp on many of his films, said that Depp wears an earpiece not for lines, but to listen to music. Probably not his own. He stated it helps Depp get into and stay in character. Depp had previously said the same thing in a 2018 interview with Rolling Stone, asserting the earpiece he wears is to listen to music and other sounds that help him feel the emotions he needs to express in the moment. Perhaps during Fantastic Beasts, he listened to Imagine Dragons and imagined himself in a better movie. So what makes Johnny cry, besides being married to real-life Harley Quinn, Amber Heard? The actor explained, "I've got bagpipes, a baby crying, and bombs going off. It creates a truth. Some of my biggest heroes were in silent film. It had to be behind the eyes, and my feeling is that if there's no truth behind the eyes, doesn't matter where the f***ing words are." Bagpipes, man. I get it. Season 2 of The White Lotus is essentially 8 hours of rich, drunk people being horrible to each other, and Aubrey Plaza was so good at it she got nominated for an Emmy. On the show, she plays Harper Spiller, who starts off very April Ludgate from Parks and Rec, before morphing into entitled, misbehaving April Ludgate from Parks and Rec. As the season progresses, Harper's drinking intensifies, leading to Plaza having to portray Harper more and more drunk. Rather than putting in an earpiece and listening to sounds of someone ripping shots of Don Julio Silva, she would literally spin around in circles and make herself dizzy before filming scenes, spinning less or more depending on how smashed she needed to be. Next time, Aubrey, just meet me at Paddy's Pub.